Nestled away from the bustling city, the quiet suburb of Maplewood was a picture of tranquility. With tree-lined streets and neatly manicured lawns, it had become a haven for families seeking peace and community. Neighbors waved as they passed each other, often stopping for a chat about their gardens or weekend plans. Children rode bikes along the sidewalks while parents tended to their flower beds, enjoying the simple pleasures of suburban life. In this serene setting, a newcomer arrived, stirring curiosity among the residents. Her name was Mrs. Thompson, and she moved into an old cottage at the end of Elm Street. From her first day, she seemed different, more reserved than the other residents, rarely joining in on neighborhood gatherings or friendly conversations. The locals wondered about her past but respected her privacy. As days turned into weeks, Mrs. Thompson began to take an unusual interest in her neighbors' properties. She could be seen taking notes while gazing at their lawns and driveways. It wasn't long before she introduced herself in a way that left everyone puzzled, handing out official-looking papers claiming violations against made-up bylaws for things like lawn height and fence color. The peace of Maplewood began to shift as whispers filled the streets. Residents exchanged worried glances, unsure of what this new woman intended with her strange rules. Little did they know, a storm was brewing just beneath the surface of their calm community. As the days passed, Mrs. Thompson's presence became more pronounced in Maplewood. She was an enigma, with an air of mystery surrounding her that both intrigued and unsettled the neighbors. Dressed in dark, formal clothing that seemed out of place among the pastel-colored homes, she rarely smiled or greeted anyone beyond a brief nod. Some residents speculated that she might be a retired government worker or perhaps someone who had endured a difficult past, but no one truly knew for sure. Even her home added to the intrigue. The old cottage at the end of Elm Street was well kept yet bore an unsettling aura. With its overgrown ivy creeping up the sides and shutters that always seemed slightly ajar, it drew whispered comments from passers-by. Children dared each other to walk past it on their way to school, while adults exchanged glances of concern and curiosity. Mrs. Thompson's unusual behavior began to surface as she meticulously observed her neighbors' yards. She would stand by her window for hours, taking notes as families went about their daily routines. Yet it was her sudden interest in their lawn care that raised eyebrows. She would often approach them with her clipboard and ask questions that seemed oddly intrusive. The whispers among the neighbors grew louder as they tried to piece together the puzzle of Mrs. Thompson's life. They wondered what she wanted from them and why she felt compelled to impose rules that didn't exist in their peaceful community. One sunny afternoon, the peace of Maplewood took a peculiar turn. Mrs. Thompson, with her clipboard in hand, began distributing official-looking notices that sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. The papers claimed to be from a homeowners association that didn't exist, and they detailed an array of bizarre violations that left residents baffled. The notices were filled with made-up bylaws. One warned a family about their lawn height exceeding the imaginary limit of 6 inches, while another accused a homeowner of having excessive garden gnomes, citing an equally fictitious restriction on decorations. Each violation came with hefty fines and threats of eviction, striking fear into the hearts of unsuspecting residents who had never before encountered such nonsense in their tranquil lives. Neighbors gathered on porches and in backyards, exchanging confused glances as they read the absurd claims. Some laughed nervously, while others felt a creeping anxiety about what was happening in their beloved community. The idea that someone could impose rules where none existed struck at the very core of their friendly, neighborly spirit. As more residents received these violations, they began to realize just how far Mrs. Thompson would go to control her surroundings. The thought that she could dictate how they lived their lives began to ignite a fire within them, a desire to stand up against her unwarranted authority. Little did they know that this was only the beginning of a much larger confrontation. The delivery of Mrs. Thompson's violation notices sent a ripple of confusion through Maplewood. One by one, residents opened their mailboxes to find the official-looking papers tucked inside, each one presenting alarming accusations about their properties. The reactions varied from disbelief to frustration as neighbors gathered in small groups to discuss the absurdity of it all. "I can't believe this," exclaimed Mrs. Jenkins, clutching her notice with a mix of anger and disbelief. "What do they mean my lawn is too tall? It's always been just fine." Across the street, Mr. Adams shook his head in dismay, wondering how he could have amassed excessive garden gnomes when he only owned 2. Some residents instinctively began to worry about compliance, questioning whether the rules could indeed be real. "Maybe we missed a meeting or something," pondered a nervous newcomer who had only just moved in. As fear crept into conversations, others reassured them, insisting that there was no homeowners association governing their community at all. Despite the reassurances, an undercurrent of anxiety lingered in the air. Families once content to enjoy backyard barbecues and leisurely walks now felt uneasy glances exchanged over picket fences. A sense of unease gripped Maplewood as everyone wondered what Mrs. Thompson's next move would be and how far she would go to enforce her made-up regulations. Little did they know that these notices would lead them down a path towards standing together against her nonsensical authority. As the days wore on, Mrs. Thompson escalated her antics, sending shockwaves through Maplewood with new threats that heightened the tension in the neighborhood. Each violation notice now came with a stern warning about fines, specifying hefty amounts for each infraction. Failure to comply will result in immediate eviction, she would claim, as if she had the authority to make such decisions. Families, who had once enjoyed peaceful lives, began to feel the weight of anxiety pressing down on them. Parents exchanged worried glances at school pickup lines, discussing how they could possibly pay these fines or what it would mean to lose their homes over something so ridiculous. Children picked up on their parents' stress and whispered among themselves, unsure of what was happening but sensing that something was very wrong. Mrs. Thompson's threats targeted not just their lawns but their sense of security and community. One evening, the Johnsons received a notice claiming that their fence was too tall according to Bylaw 3-4, which had never existed. Mr. Johnson felt his heart race as he imagined losing the home where his children had grown up. Conversations grew more serious. Neighbors were no longer simply confused or annoyed, they were genuinely afraid of what would happen next. The vibrant spirit of Maplewood began to dim as families huddled together in fear, contemplating how to stand against Mrs. Thompson's unwarranted demands. Little did they know that this growing tension would soon spark a collective action that would shift the power dynamic in their community for good. As anxiety spread through Maplewood, a small group of determined neighbors decided it was time to take action and investigate Mrs. Thompson's claims. Led by the resourceful Mrs. Jenkins, they gathered at her house one evening to discuss their growing suspicions about the new residents' authority. "We can't let her control our lives like this," she asserted, glancing around at the worried faces gathered around her dining table. The group began pooling their resources to uncover the truth. They shared copies of the violation notices they had received and noted the absurdities in the made-up bylaws. "What if we check property records?" suggested Mr. Adams, who had worked in real estate and was familiar with local regulations. This idea sparked a flurry of excitement. If there was no HOA, then there was no basis for her threats. The following day, armed with determination and curiosity, they visited the town hall to inspect property records. As they dug deeper into public documents, it became abundantly clear that there was no homeowners association governing Maplewood, just as they had suspected. This revelation ignited a fire within the group. They would not allow Mrs. Thompson to dictate their lives any longer. With newfound confidence, they formulated a plan not only to confront her but also to reclaim their sense of community. Discussions turned from fear and doubt into strategies for a united response against her unwarranted authority, transforming apprehension into empowerment as they prepared for what lay ahead. As the group of neighbors gathered their courage to confront Mrs. Thompson, one brave resident decided to take action on her own. Ms. Patel, a longtime Maplewood resident known for her meticulous nature, took it upon herself to visit the town hall and check property records. Armed with determination, she made her way to the local government office, feeling a mix of apprehension and resolve. Upon arriving, she approached the clerk and requested information about any homeowners association that might govern the community. The clerk smiled politely and began flipping through the documents. As Ms. Patel waited, she could feel her heart racing. If there truly was no HOA, it would change everything. After a few moments, the clerk confirmed what Ms. Patel had hoped for: there's no HOA in Maplewood. You're free to enjoy your property as you see fit." Ms. Patel's heart soared with relief and excitement as she realized the implications of this discovery. Armed with solid proof, she hurried back to share the news with her neighbors. When she arrived at Mrs. Jenkins' house, they gathered around her in anticipation. With a triumphant smile, Ms. Patel announced, "We have no HOA. Mrs. Thompson's claims are completely false." This revelation sent shockwaves through the group but ignited a fire of determination within them. They now had the truth on their side, fueling their resolve to stand up against Mrs. Thompson's unfounded authority and reclaim their peaceful lives in Maplewood. News of Ms. Patel's discovery spread like wildfire through Maplewood, uniting residents who felt a surge of empowerment and determination. Social media groups, neighborhood chats, and casual conversations at the local park buzzed with excitement and relief. "Did you hear?" became a rallying cry that connected neighbors as they exchanged their own stories of the absurd violations they had received. Each account fueled their desire to stand together against Mrs. Thompson's unfounded authority. Families began to organize meetings in backyards and community spaces, where they shared their thoughts and developed strategies for confronting Mrs. Thompson. The once fractured sense of community started to mend as everyone realized they were not alone in their struggles against her demands. Parents laughed together over shared frustrations, while children played nearby, blissfully unaware that a storm was brewing. As the planning progressed, one neighbor proposed a bold idea: a block party in front of Mrs. Thompson's cottage titled, "No HOA Day." The name sparked laughter and nods of approval, as everyone agreed it would be a fun way to assert their freedom and make a statement. Flyers were quickly created, spreading the invitation far and wide, encouraging all residents to join in this celebration of unity. On the day of the event, the neighborhood came alive with laughter, music, and colorful decorations. The spirit of camaraderie filled the air as families set up picnic tables and grills, ready to enjoy an afternoon together, reclaiming their community while sending a clear message to Mrs. Thompson: they would no longer be intimidated by her empty threats. The day of the No HOA Day block party arrived, filling the air with anticipation and excitement. Residents of Maplewood gathered outside Mrs. Thompson's cottage, transforming what had once been a place of intimidation into a vibrant celebration of community spirit. Colorful banners were hung, proudly declaring their defiance against her arbitrary rules, while balloons bobbed in the gentle breeze. Families brought picnic baskets filled with delicious treats, sandwiches, salads, and homemade desserts, and set up tables along the sidewalk. Kids ran around with bright balloons tied to their wrists, joyfully playing games while adults clinked glasses and shared laughter. Mr. Adams pulled out his grill, sizzling burgers and hot dogs as the mouth-watering aroma wafted through the neighborhood. As the festivities continued, neighbors took turns sharing their own experiences with Mrs. Thompson's unwarranted violations, turning frustration into humor as they recalled the absurdity of her claims. "Remember when she said my flower pots were too big?" Mrs. Jenkins chuckled, prompting everyone to laugh together at how ridiculous it all seemed now. The atmosphere was electric with unity as people waved to passing cars, inviting them to join in the fun. It wasn't just a party, it was a declaration of solidarity as the community reclaimed their joy together. With each laugh and cheer that echoed through Maplewood that day, it became clear that they would no longer be intimidated by Mrs. Thompson's empty threats. They had taken a stand, not just for themselves but for the neighborhood they cherished. As the block party kicked into high gear, the sounds of laughter and music floated through the air, but inside Mrs. Thompson's cottage, a different atmosphere prevailed. Feeling increasingly threatened by the vibrant celebration happening outside, she paced back and forth, her mind racing with anxiety. "This can't be allowed," she muttered to herself, convinced that the neighbors were openly mocking her authority. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Mrs. Thompson grabbed her phone and called the police. "There's a large gathering in front of my house," she explained, her voice tinged with urgency. "They're violating local noise ordinances and disturbing the peace." Her heart raced as she imagined how the officers would come to her aid, putting an end to what she saw as an out-of-control rebellion. Meanwhile, outside, the party continued to flourish, with neighbors dancing, chatting, and even playing games on the lawn. Little did they know that Mrs. Thompson had contacted the authorities in hopes of putting a damper on their joyous occasion. When the police arrived moments later, they were met not with chaos but with smiles and cheerful waves from the gathered crowd. The officers quickly assessed the situation and joined in on the revelry rather than intervene. "We're just here to make sure everyone is safe and having a good time," one officer said with a friendly nod. The neighbors rejoiced as they realized that even the authorities were on their side, reinforcing their sense of community and solidarity against Mrs. Thompson's unfounded claims. As the block party continued, the atmosphere filled with laughter and music, the police officers who had arrived to investigate Mrs. Thompson's complaint stood on the outskirts of the gathering. They exchanged amused glances as they observed the joyful scene before them, a stark contrast to the tense environment that had prevailed just days earlier. After a brief discussion among themselves, one officer stepped forward to address the crowd. With a friendly smile, he called out, "Folks, we just wanted to check in and see what was going on." The neighbors welcomed him with cheers, excited to have their local law enforcement join in their celebration. The officer then explained, "We understand there was a concern about noise and disturbances, but it's important to note that there are no rules being broken here. There's no homeowners association in Maplewood, which means there are no fines or violations to enforce. You all have every right to enjoy your property and celebrate as you wish." The crowd erupted in applause, relieved to hear that their gathering was not only acceptable but supported by those tasked with upholding the law. The officers laughed and joined in the festivities, mingling with residents and enjoying the food. With their fears allayed and a newfound sense of security, the neighbors felt a surge of unity. They were no longer just individuals fighting against Mrs. Thompson's claims, they were a community standing strong together, ready to reclaim their lives without fear of her baseless authority. As the block party continued to flourish, Mrs. Thompson watched from her window, her heart sinking with each burst of laughter and cheer that echoed outside. The vibrant scene before her was a stark contrast to the control she had once believed she wielded over the neighborhood. For the first time, she felt outnumbered, as clearly, her attempts to enforce non-existent rules were met with defiance and unity among the neighbors. The realization washed over her like a cold wave, her authority was crumbling, and the community she had sought to intimidate was now stronger than ever. Mrs. Thompson's mind raced as she replayed her past interactions with the residents, recalling how they had cowered under her threats. Now they stood together in solidarity, celebrating their freedom right in front of her own home. Feeling a mix of anger and despair, she stepped outside, hoping to confront them and regain some semblance of power. However, the sight that greeted her only deepened her sense of isolation. Neighbors hugged one another and shared stories, their smiles brightening the afternoon sun. They had not only reclaimed their joy but were ready to stand firmly against any further intimidation. With every cheerful shout that resonated in the air, Mrs. Thompson understood that her grip on Maplewood was permanently lost. As she turned away from the scene outside, she felt a chilling realization settle in: she would no longer be able to control this community, instead, she had inadvertently united them against her. In the aftermath of the block party, the residents of Maplewood found themselves more connected than ever. The experience of standing together against Mrs. Thompson's unwarranted authority had forged strong bonds among neighbors. They began to meet regularly, not just to discuss the past but to strengthen their community ties and ensure that everyone felt included and safe. Families organized weekly gatherings, from potlucks to game nights, fostering an environment of friendship and support. Parents exchanged contact information, creating a network where they could easily communicate concerns or simply check in on one another. Children formed new friendships as they played together in yards that were once under threat from made-up bylaws, their laughter echoing through the streets. As the seasons changed, so did the community spirit in Maplewood. Residents collaborated on neighborhood projects, such as cleaning up parks and planting flowers along the sidewalks, transforming their suburb into a more vibrant and welcoming place. They took pride in their homes and their shared spaces, reinforcing the idea that they were not just neighbors but a family. Reflecting on their journey, many acknowledged that Mrs. Thompson's actions had inadvertently brought them together. They realized that they could face any challenge as a unified front, and this newfound sense of solidarity would serve as a foundation for keeping Maplewood a friendly and inclusive community. With each gathering and shared experience, they fortified their commitment to protecting the place they called home, ensuring it remained a sanctuary for all.